Clark is a New Zealand-born designer, educated at Victoria University in Wellington. His first job as a designer was for Auckland-based brassware brand Methven, and was a classic introduction to real-world industrial design, particularly the opportunities and constraints of mass market and mass production. This experience put him in good stead for a new role in London as a senior designer for eminent British cross-disciplinary studio Pearson Lloyd. Eventually returning to New Zealand in 2013, Clark now applies his approach to a variety of roles as director of his own business, Clark Bardsley Design Limited, and as a designer for ALT Group, and as a casual lecturer in industrial design at AUT. Clark creates high-quality contemporary work with a materials-focused, observation-led approach to objects and spaces. Please put your hands together for Clark, please.
Hi everyone, thanks Darren. Thanks Phil for hooking me up. Okay, hi, my name's Clark. I'm an industrial designer, whatever that means. I think the ambiguity of the word industrial designer is actually quite convenient for most of the jobs I get into, because I get into them without knowing really what I'm doing at the beginning, and people just assume because I've got this title that I'll be okay. So that's a great thing, the ambiguity of the word industrial design. So my career's basically been across so far, how long has my career been? About 10 years since I graduated. But product design, furniture design, public art, public spaces, interior architecture, transportation design, and healthcare environment design, that kind of thing. So a lot of that stuff was due to the fact I was working at this cross-disciplinary studio in London called Pearson Lloyd, as mentioned, and that was a great way to be introduced to a huge range of types of jobs. So now I'm back in New Zealand doing my own thing, but I'm going to begin, so I thought, how am I going to talk about industrial design? What are the things that kind of link my work together and hold it together as bodies of work? Because it's so diverse, what are the common threads, if you like? So today I'm going to attempt to talk about two threads. Materiality, that is the exploitation of material properties, and familiarity, so creating objects that have a familiarness to them. So I've never really spoken about that before. It's kind of abstract, but I'm going to give it a go and see if we'll see what happens. So, beginning with materiality, there are, in my mind, two ways that you can think about materiality. There's materiality that reflects the process of its manufacture, and there's materiality that reflects its use as an object or as an environment. I think the most common approach to materials in the public environment is often to use the highest spec material we can to make sure that it resists any weathering, and resists any change, and stays in its form for as long as possible. So we see buildings made of stainless steel and glass a lot. My first role at Methven, just down the road, as a young'un, was the same approach really, but in the sense of the product. So it was everything that we produce and everything that they basically still produce there is chrome plated, because it's easy to clean and it's it looks shiny and nice. But I think in this image here you can see the prototype of an overhead drencher that we worked on, and then the final product as well. And to me, I actually feel like the prototype has greater value and greater beauty than the end product almost. And that often is the case in industrial design products. You end up with something plastic at the end that doesn't reflect the kind of complexity and beauty of the tools that are actually used to create that in the first place. I think that's a real shame. I think as objects sometimes wear and, patina, that word's already been used today and I can see a lot of patina going on in this room, authentic or not. But I think an authentic patina really helps you bond with an object. And that's an unusual thing to think about, forming a bond with a disposable product. But I think it's a valid one. The way that timber weathers. So actually designing something to age and from the beginning. Understanding how that material will perform in the environment that you're putting it into. How it will wear with use. How it will exhibit its characteristics. These are just a few snaps of that kind of thing, but I love the way that manhole covers just scuff and polish to a bright on the high points. This is a manhole cover in Rome, but to me, that is far more beautiful than anything perfectly finished. Something that wears its scars and exhibits them. This is a chopping board in one of the offices that I work in, and I just love it. I love that object. It's my favourite chopping board because it's got this kind of scar from the time someone left it on the element, and there's no other chopping board like it. It tells a story. These are Sprite bottles that obviously sit in their crate and rattle and wear away on the ridges. And using an object like that gives me pleasure, and I think gives probably a lot of people pleasure because it has this kind of history, and it demonstrates that. This is Juliet in Verona, and she's been so well patinaed in one particular area that it's worn through. I think they've actually had to remove this statue from the site because it's become so worn from the good luck of touching her on the boob. So people like that kind of thing. It's human nature to appreciate patina and wear and the history of an object. This is a fascinating book called The Colouring, Bronzing and Patination of Metals, done in the 90s. And it gives recipes for how to age copper alloys using different chemicals and creating a really diverse spectrum of effects within that patination. It's just page after page of colour picture of these little samples. So that's really interesting. And we bought that book for a project in the UK, which we did in Bath. So the first project I want to speak about is it was a public realm project for Bath and North East Somerset Council. Bath being the most popular place in the UK to visit after London for tourists. Very touristic place. A very romantic place, a place that defends its heritage extremely staunchly and doesn't like anything new happening. There are maybe you could count the number of new buildings on one hand in that place, and they were hard fought, I tell you. So to be engaged in this project was really interesting, and then from the very beginning there was this tension between us, the contemporary designers. We didn't design things that had a heritage look to them. We designed contemporary work. So how were we to approach this job? This is Bath. This is in one of the gardens next to the Avon River. We decided that a way to navigate the opposition to anything new was to use materiality, to imbue the new objects, the contemporary objects, with a sense of craft that would appease any kind of craftsman from the past, or any old school kind of dude that likes the way things were done and doesn't want them changed. And really layer in this idea of patina and materiality to very contemporary, crisp, modern forms. And we also used a lot of reference to, because what we were designing in this case was wayfinding and transportation objects. So we wanted to really bring in this heritage, the joy, the play of navigation to the objects through referencing orienteering and compasses and that kind of thing. So bringing in those kind of details. So this is this is probably the only new object to be installed in front of the Abbey in a very, very long time. Very crisp object, but one that didn't feel unnatural in that location because of its simplicity and because of the way that the materials worked in that site. So these were not solid brass, but they were brass-clad structures that were patinated to a bronze, and that's it. Not coated, not clear-coated, not painted, just left to do what they I want to do in the environment. Like a piece of sculpture, like a bronze sculpture you'll find in any European city. There it is, poking its head up above tourists. There's a whole backstory to the form in terms of the simplicity of its geometry, relating a lot to the Georgian geometry of the architecture of the place, which is very prevalent there. So we sort of tied that into that. There's offset geometries of circles and squares and rectangles. In fact, does anyone know Bath? Yeah, I mean, if you look at Bath in plan, it is just, there's a circle, and there's a square, and there's a rectangle, and then there's a crescent. So there are these very puristic geometries in this city. So we really tease those out, put them into the objects. Creating a new language in a way, not trying to fit with an existing language, but creating a new one that felt sympathetic. The one I'm going to talk about is the way that copper or brass or any copper alloy responds to urine. Not necessarily human urine, but animal urine. So little people bring in their pet dogs. And so we had this kind of problem in a way. Although we're kind of like, well, you know, that's just part of it. That's just part of the way the material ages. That's part of the patina in a way. And over time, of course, the first streak of urine that runs down the sign is going to be very outstanding. But after that build-up occurs, it sort of becomes just normal. And you see it in bronze doors to shops, even in Oxford Street in London. You know, you get this greening at the bottom. It just happens. But the council were a bit kind of funny about it. So we, because this was just a prototype run, we went away and we thought, how can we disguise the leak? So we were already etching the panels with the detailing around the circle. So the etching process was already happening. So perhaps we could use etching to kind of create an optical illusion that you didn't immediately associate the patterns with the weed. So we did a few trials, and we were out at the factory experimenting with all sorts of different techniques. And in the end, this was what we went with. So just the dot pattern sort of broke up the stream, so it was more like just circles of green. So that kind of worked, and it actually kind of improved the objects because it had this level of this beautiful detail at the ground level, which you know, it was nice. It sort of exposed the patination even more in a good way. There you go. That's one of the new ones. The other materiality story behind this object is the map. So vitreous enamel. Anyone used that before as a process? It's very well used in the UK in the underground. All of the metal panels are vitreous enamel. So they're basically coated in glass. So they don't really, they're very hard to vandalise. You can't really even scratch them. So there is a specialist company, I think it was in Isle of Wight, that did vitreous enamel maps. And that involves screening layer by layer every colour and every graphic onto the map. A very, very old and complex piece of craftsmanship, if you like. And also a beautiful gloss finish that really complemented the patina on the brass. So these guys, they were given a map design by the wayfinding design team who we were partnered with as the product designers. And somehow the wayfinding designers ended up finding a map that needed 14 different colours to be screened on. And every time that colour was screened on, you bake it, right? You stick it in the oven and you bake that layer off and you take it out again. Every time you do that, the colour changes a bit. So there's effectively 14 colour changes on the first colour, which have to be anticipated in order for the final map to match the specification of the artwork. We were like, oh my god. But I mean, it wasn't our problem. But in the end, it was a beautiful map, and will last forever. They worked very hard on making sure that it was future-proofed in terms of the things they put onto that map. And you look closely at the map and you can see the layering. So it really has this beautiful sense of craft to it. You can see each layer individually layered on top of each other, and some of them are more translucent than others, and so it's a really nice effect. The other part of the bath project was street furniture. So not stuff you used to find your way around, but stuff that you sit on. And we also wanted to bring this material quality, this materiality to these objects as well. So because we had these very stern and serious wayfinding objects throughout the city, we thought the antidote to that would be some quite romantic and contemporary but romantic forms that kind of balanced out the new set of objects that were being installed. So we thought, okay, park benches, everyone loves to sit on a park bench. It has that romantic feel to it, which really suits Bath. So how about we just design a really contemporary park bench, but we do it in cast solid bronze. So there we go for costing. I think bronze, to cast bronze costs twice as much as casting aluminium. And casting aluminium costs about twice as much as casting iron. So yeah, it's about 4 times as much as steel, but again, it's something that will just sit there and never ever need touching again. As long as you lock it down to the ground securely. I don't think any of them have been stolen since they've been installed, and that's been over 5 years now. So here we go. That's the pattern. We went to this amazing art foundry. I think they've done Henry Moore's and all sorts there, in a place called Braintree. Interesting name. And yeah, they were really open to showing us, helping us be a part of this process. So here we are, sand casting. We made MDF molds. We set them in sand. They spectacularly flame off the sand to set it hard around where they're going to pour the bronze in. There's the bronze. How awesome is that? Huge, ugly, big bronze ingots fresh from God knows where in the world, but you don't really want to know. And then into the furnace, poured into a bucket, carried over on a hook. This was my childhood dream come true watching this process. I was just loving it. And they pour it in this into the top, and it just goes through all the things into the molds. And you get these objects which take on the texture of the sand. So the materiality really showing through. You're letting the object speak about the process, whereas the wayfinding was about materiality that reflected use, and you keep touching it in certain places, it will wear through. This was about materiality that reflected the process and the way that the object was made, and wore that proudly. So yeah, you can see we didn't before. So obviously it doesn't come out that colour. It was patinated in advance so that it wouldn't age too strangely on the street. So you kind of pre-age it a little bit, but we didn't take off any of the. We didn't really grind off any of the seam lines or anything. We just kind of let it be. These are the objects in the city now. There's plenty of these around. If you go to Bath, have a look. You can see them greening off in the rain. They look beautiful in the rain because the timber goes really dark and nice. So that's the street furniture. There's cycle racks as well, and there's bollards. Okay, so that was Bath. Now I'm going to talk about one of my more recent projects. It was actually the first project that I embarked on when I came back to New Zealand. Not sure where the idea came from. I had this kind of tacit thought about bending tube, and I think there was maybe like some primary school furniture or something that was bent tube, and around the bends there were wrinkles. There were little kind of wrinkles as it was bent, and I thought, hey, that's cool. Maybe everyone's striving so intensely to achieve the perfect smooth bend in anything they're doing these days. So perhaps you could turn the wrinkle bend into a detail, into a piece of decorative detail on the object. So I rang around all the tube benders in Auckland, and none of them could give a shit about it. They were like, mate, why'd you write a bloody wrinkle in it? I ended up in Hamilton. Some dude there who was pretty fresh startup in the tube bending world. And he was like, oh yeah, give it a go. And he actually SolidWorksed up a tool for me, just laser cut some fins and kind of just sort of dodgily welded them together. But what came out of it was perfect, exactly what I wanted. So we created this really nice little bend with these little wriggles or wrinkles in them. Because what was attractive to me about this idea was metal wants to deform when you bend it. Obviously, you're compressing the inside of that tube more than you're stretching the outside, right? So why hide that? Why not celebrate it? So allow the metal to crumple in a certain way. This is not the tool, but that's a tool that we're going to make once the laser cut one dies. So you can see exactly how that works. Basically, the excess material as it's compressed squeezes into those gaps. So you're probably wondering what the object is. I haven't shown you yet, have I? So it's a bar stool. I mean, it could be anything. What's not the point what the object was. It was all about the process and learning about that process and doing something that no one else was thinking about. So yeah, it's a little wrinkle bend, and that's the product. It's the Tangle bar stool. It's sold by a company called Essence, which is based on Roseback Road too, pretty much, Holland Place, down the other end. So a lot of industry around this area, which is great. So that's the Tangle stool. And carrying on that thing was, I think, how could I use the wrinkle bend in another way? So this is a coffee table, 36 identical bends, with the wrinkle bend being the hero rather than just the bit at the bottom next to the floor. Yeah, that's working. Good. Yeah. But still a prototype, not in production. Although if anyone wants to buy one, here we go. And a little family of objects came out of it. Carrying on, materiality. Who's heard of a company called Rekindle? Anyone? Has anyone ever specified Rekindle furniture? They were a Christchurch company that started after the earthquakes to use materials from demolition, which there was a lot of. And I think a huge struggle for them to even get access to the demoed materials. It was just all going into landfill, and shocking amounts of landfill. Absolutely shocking. You don't want to see the pictures of that. In fact, I think there's some on Rekindle's website you could have a look at. But they managed to get hold of some and convert it, elevate it, turn it into furniture. After a while, the value of they became known for that one thing alone, but they were more interested in the idea of helping to conquer waste as a whole. So they did they put a call out to designers in Auckland, and they had some waste material from commercial companies, and one of those materials was MDF, laminate MDF from kitchen companies. CNC machines cutting up cabinetry for kitchen people, cabinet makers, and it's just shocking the amount of waste, honestly, because you can never get exactly the amount of panels or shapes onto the sheet that you need. Quite often you have a quarter of a sheet. They have 2 or 3 skip bins there that get emptied twice a week, full of some of the nicest laminates you can find. Really expensive stuff as well. So I was thinking, Rekindle suggested maybe I'd want to work with the MDF, because MDF, and I like that idea because MDF is not seen as a beautiful material. And I thought, well, because it's not, probably a lot of people haven't looked at it and really thought about its potential as a material in its own right. I thought maybe I could do that. So I just sat down for 5 minutes and thought about bending it. What would happen if you were able to fold MDF, like cut it not all the way through, and then use the laminate as a kind of hinge. And then that sort of didn't work. First of all, I tried 90 degrees. But then, obviously, if you only bend it a fraction of a degree, then it doesn't break. So I spent a little bit of time at the university workshop, which I have access to as a part-time casual lecturer, which is a good benefit. And figured out that you need exactly, I think, 33 cuts of a 3mm width blade to a certain point depth through the material before, if you bend it all the way around, it meets exactly back where it was. Now, of course, it took a long time to figure that out. Lots of experiments on spacing and depth of cut and the amount of cuts until but once you've got it, once you've got exactly the depth, exactly the amount of cuts, it's infinite. It's repeatable without error. So you just cut, and every time you know it's going to meet. So the idea wasn't to create a commercial product, but more a way to find a use for a material that will elevate it and turn it into something beautiful. So MDF can be beautiful. Here's a video. I don't know if there's sound or not, but the sound's the best part. It makes this awesome cracking noise, but it doesn't break. Could be a bit faster. And up close, the cracks look a bit like that. So it does actually crack, but I liked that. And I liked, again, here I am on my kind of materiality buzz, but you know, the crack, every crack's different. You know, it's got its own quality.
You get that to lots of different radii?
Yeah, well, it just depends on the spacing of the cut. Yeah, and the thickness of the material.
Yeah.
So you have different amounts of cuts for different thicknesses of MDF. Because the angle, if it's thicker, is less when you bend it. Yeah. So lots of variables, but quite satisfying process, and how it could be applied to something that no one's ever thought of before, potentially. The next project I'm talking about is a light that I make. Well, I don't make it, but I was involved in the prototyping. Has anyone ever used this process of spinning metal? A few people? Cool. So spinning metal over molds. So there's these giant molds. There's an amazing place. There's only 3, I think, in the whole country that spin metal. It's quite specialised, although a lot of it's automated now, but not all of it. If you go to this place in Mount Roskill, I think it's Mount Roskill, called Metal Spinners Limited, and they have just a factory full of moulds of everything that they've ever spun. They've got these shelves and shelves and shelves of all these different shapes. And so you put these, you cut a circle out of steel or whatever malleable sheet material, aluminium or stainless steel or mild steel, copper, not brass though apparently, and you basically rub it as it spins over top of this mold. So you start off with this disc, you end up with these things here. This next video isn't from, this is from Marrakesh actually, but is that even visible? It's a bit dark, eh? You get the idea. It's pretty hard. Like you do have to press quite hard to get it to bend, and it's quite interesting because the material thickness changes as you get closer to the edges. So at the very edge, finish of the object, it's very fine, but at the base, it's nice and thick. So that's quite interesting. And you get these, you get the lines of the tool in the object, which is nice. And again here, I've kind of chosen to celebrate that, celebrate the machining marks, the hand of the craftsperson. So I make these lights called cloud lights, which are just different sized domes joined together. But people seem to like them. And if you blacken them, which is another interesting process, so I've tried to avoid paint. The blackening is basically like pickling. You sort of boil the metal, the steel in acid, and it blackens. You do it to like a lot of tool parts. I think engineers' workshops are always blackening bits. I don't even know what for, to be honest. But I cashed in on that process and thought, here we go, something interesting. And what it does, it's so thin that when you have an incandescent bulb in there or compact halogen in there or whatever, something with a yellow light, gives this beautiful gold luster when it's on, but black when it's off. So that's materiality. I'm going to talk a bit about familiarity, not just because it rhymes with materiality, but leading on, the idea behind the cloud light originally was to create an object that hadn't been seen before, but somehow had a familiarity to it. Because I think there's value in familiarity. Sometimes newness is not always the best thing, in my mind. It can be as desirable as newness. And I think the challenge to me as a designer is to achieve familiarity without people knowing why it's familiar to them. It just somehow is. So everybody knows that this is a tree, right? This, I think, is the earliest drawing ever of a tree. But if we, from a very, very young age, we kind of have a sense of pictorial representations of objects at their greatest simplicity, and you understand what that is. There are many different forms of tree, but that tree will always mean that tree. It will always represent any tree that you ever see. So it's kind of like an icon, right? The art of icons. So why would we look to create something that was familiar? What's the benefit in creating familiar objects? I think a familiar object is an icon, so it's memorable. It's a symbol, so it's simple. It's an archetype, so it's recognizable. It's a cartoon, so it's light-hearted, doesn't take itself too seriously. It has a graphic quality, so it's easy to read. And most importantly, it doesn't have a style. So an object that is an icon of itself has no style. It just is what it is. It doesn't obey the laws of fashion. So I think I try to bring that to my work. I hope that makes sense. I'm sort of winging it here. But, I was just looking up today the idea of perhaps we're born, and Plato the philosopher thought that we were born with certain understanding of objects already in our minds. And that might be true because there's this kind of, when you close your eyes, you see little floaties sometimes. Right, so that you're already born, before you see anything, you're born with certain what they call entoptic forms in your mind already. So before you're even born, as you're developing as a fetus or whatever, you already have a visual language, in theory. So and some people have studied it obviously, and seen how those entoptic forms have actually influenced the way that we've drawn and created the icons. And obviously that's a heritage, a lineage of form and line that we have today, because it's all just built on that. So an interesting idea. I'm not sure how much gravity there is to that idea, but for me it's a much more poetic and lovely idea than this for inspiration. Pinterest. That's a nicer idea that we can just close our eyes and visualize the forms we want our objects to have, rather than having to go online and find inspiration in other people's work. This, a symptom of designing very simple and familiar objects is that quite often you don't have to do a lot of drawing. It's just there in the mind already. The drawing is already in your mind before you start to make the object. So with the cloud light, this was the only drawing I think I ever did. And I was like, all right, I'll just go to the spinners and see what shapes they've got. And then we'll try and cut them and put them together. So it wasn't about the typical industrial design, marker rendering, wet dream. It was really about form distilled to its essence. So the classic pendant shade, cut and joined with other pendants. Like they've merged into one. So this was before the blackened ones. This was the first cloud light I ever did. It was commissioned for a guy in Wellington, and we didn't. Well, it's mild steel. I don't think I've got. It's mild steel, and it's been zinc passivated, which is what they do to supermarket trolleys. It's got that kind of greeny, bluey, rainbowy luster to it. which is kind of interesting. And then the inside I took to a car painter just down the road from, like literally 3 doors down from the zinc passivator. I love Only Hunger, that's where it's at. And he coated it in automotive grade white paint on the inside. Gloss, heavy gloss. So that kind of really beautiful fine finish next to something quite industrial. Quite nice. Anyway, I'm sort of drifting back into materiality here, but you get the picture. It still has this idea of a familiar pendant over your dining room table, but it has this twist to it. Twisting an archetype. And I now make them in 1s, 2s and 3s. So I have this grand notion of someone buying one of every size and then doing a sort of chandelier-like installation where it looks like there was just originally 12 dome pendants and somehow they've just kind of merged in with each other over time or something. I don't know. Okay, the next one is a shelf that I designed, but again I didn't really start off wanting to design a shelf. I'm a bit weird like that. I just had this idea. I was just sick of seeing people using the golden ratio in design. Because it's a load of bullshit really, isn't it? The golden ratio. I mean, the idea is that the golden ratio exists in nature, in spirals, and the world's full of spirals. We've got fern fronds, we've got cyclones, we've got galaxial spirals. And they all follow, according to our man Fibonacci, Italian mathematician and philosopher from 11th century or something. He developed this way of counting numbers that sort of replicated this commonly found spiral-esque form in nature. And come the Renaissance, everybody was getting on the bandwagon with the golden ratio. Mr. Da Vinci himself was doing that. And now you get a lot of sort of art historians wandering around just dropping bloody golden ratio diagrams over anything they find and think, yeah, see how that lines up? They're obviously doing it to the golden ratio. And I'm sort of like, oh, for God's sake. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't, I don't know. But you sort of get that happening as well in contemporary culture. There's this obsession with it. But I think this was a fight in an Eastern European government, parliament building. And the photograph was then, someone said, there's something about that photograph. Maybe it's got the golden ratio in it somewhere. And they sort of dropped it over. And it's happening a lot. I keep seeing it in the media. Weird. Anyway, so... There you go. There you go.
And it automatically comes up with those versions of Photoshop. So people crop a photo, match an image, match those words.
I mean, it's a nice idea. It's got a grand notion to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're buying into a system of proportion that has been used for centuries. Because you can't use your own brain to figure that out. Like, you can't use your own eye. Surely your eye should be trained well enough to figure that out. Anyway, so I thought, I'm just going to literally use the golden ratio to create an object and not use it to like inform my object, but actually just extrude it and make a shelf out of it. So it's a joke, and but people do buy it. It doesn't work very well in the top area because there's no shelves. But you hang a piece of art there or something, and it's fine. This is my one, and I do actually use it like that. It is actually really handy. You keep deodorant in that one. It does actually keep things organised. It's quite good. You should buy one. There's a few different sizes available. And it's made in birch plywood. It's self-explanatory. So I really like the idea of humour being used in design because quite often design is so serious. And we take ourselves very seriously as a community. But why not have a bit of a laugh sometimes and a bit of a joke and bring a bit of that lightheartedness in by making visual puns, basically. So, yeah. Golden, that's the badge in the middle. And gold, solid gold. No, just brass. The other icon that I've been working with recently, and I sort of got something made with the idea, but not everything yet, is windows. So a lot of the work I did in the UK was in office workplaces. What is the future of work? What is the furniture that will support the way we work as we evolve and our technology changes and the way we interact with people changes and blah, blah, blah. So I'm doing a little bit of work with a guy that peeled off from Europe. He was a client for the company I worked for there. Now he's in Sydney, and he runs co-working spaces, but sort of high-end ones. And I fit out his spaces for him. We're just doing one in Melbourne at the moment, and because I understand the furniture and I've kind of done all this work on planning space and understanding how people work and collaborate and that kind of thing, we do all this work together. So the first fit out we did in Sydney overlooked Hyde Park and the law courts. Beautiful spot. Those were some drawings. But I find when you start these projects, you've got to have an idea, a guiding principle behind the work. You can't just sort of drift along and use nice materials. And you need an idea, and it goes with any project. The idea is the compass for a work. And so the idea was windows and its association with transparency in architecture. So it's almost a comment on open plan offices. You know, how do you divide up space but still allow transparency and openness in the way you work? And the window is kind of a nice icon for that idea. So we put these kind of big, awesome blackened steel partitions throughout the space. Another thing that with this classic window, like a child's drawing of window, and what we also did was we removed the office from the corner of the building, big glass buildings. So we're saying we're not having corner offices. This isn't a hierarchical workplace. This is a space where anyone can work. So the corner office becomes a shared space, which is quite interesting. The reason that I was kind of interested in working with steel and more like a hard, I guess, masculine or architectural approach to furniture and fitting out, dividing up space was a lot of the work I did in the UK was at the time very progressive, but now has become almost saturated with products that all look the same. Upholstery culture and furniture, creating pods and booths and spaces where you kind of inhabit. It's kind of like the cubicles, but nice. It's like cubicles of the 70s, but nice and soft and like acoustically dampening, that kind of thing. So I was thinking, fuck that. How about you've always got to kind of be ahead of trends like that. And rather than going forward, I sort of went back. If we're removing the corner office, how can we still keep some of that that kind of sophistication in the space? So we're developing some products at the moment. We're doing the space in Melbourne, but we're also doing some products. So we've got the corner office for one. That can just be in space. And it's in steel and glass, and it's just a window and a desk. And so you can kind of go in there and have your little private space and then go back to your desk later. So I guess it comes from the idea of at your desk, it's where you work with other people, it's actually a collaborative space. If you want privacy, if you want quiet, then you relocate. You relocate to concentrate. But you're in a team. You're at a large desk normally in an office, open plan office. You're actually with your team. You kind of need to be able to talk to them. So shutting yourself off isn't what you need to do in that space. If you want to shut yourself off, you relocate. So these types of pieces of furniture are increasingly important in open plan. So hopefully those get off the ground. They're pretty cool. And so the idea is you have a framework, which is a window, but you can snap in acoustic panels or timber panels or whatever you like. Easy peasy, in theory. Am I dragging on? Am I all right?
We've got probably about another 5 or 6 minutes.
No, that's what you say when I've already gone over 5 minutes. Okay, sorry, I'll hurry up. Another project, this is traipsing back now to when I was at Methven. The first project we ever did after I finished university, we went from Wellington to Auckland. There were 3 of us from Vic, and we were to develop this kind of crazy outdoor shower, which was designed by Kylie, the girl in the picture. And so we spent 3 months developing this 6-metre long outdoor shower called Pipette, which was about showering under a measured dose of water, like a pipette, you know. So conserving water, it collects during the day, and then that water is dosed out in 1 minute's worth of water. So we did some experiments with scale, and Methven's awesome because they've got such fantastic machines and machinists, and so we had all these facilities at our disposal to make really sophisticated tests. No, we did some more sophisticated ones than that. But yeah, hanging buckets off a big brass pole, that was pretty cool. Figuring out where the weight needed to be, where the pivot point needed to be. And we ended up spending a lot of time at a boat builder's in Mount Roscoe in Hunga, somewhere there. And we made this mould. Who says designers can't have a bit of fun, eh? Here we are, there's 2 other design students in their lemmings outfits with the 2 shells of the pipette. There's the final object. It was caused a bit of a stir at the time. I think the Dominion Post had the headline, "What's up with Methven? They've got a giant sperm with a woman taking a wet t-shirt competition underneath it." And they had the image half a page in the business section, cover of the business section or something. So I think exactly the right effect they were hoping for there, really. But yeah, this beautiful carbon fibre, very sculptural, oversized pipette, which filled up with water. And
What, you fill it up with a hose, do you?
yeah, it's got an open top. It's got a little valve on it. Sort of when it works according to its own balance. When it's full of water, it sits back and it shuts itself off. And then you pull it down from the front with this wand, and all the water runs down, and it stays down until it's empty, and then it goes. Yeah. I work 3 days a week because I need real money at a company called Alt Group, who are a graphic design company, branding company, but a really awesome one. And they build a lot of stuff. So they need someone like me. They're actually the 2 founders of the company are fine artists, sculptors, specialising in sculpture. So they're very interested in making things. So we make all sorts of things, and one of our clients is one of their clients is the Auckland City Council Arts and Culture Division, and every year they do these installation works called POP. You might have seen them around. Last year we did ping pong tables that were sound activated. We had them in Takatai Square and Aotea Square, and we had these pop plinths, which I thought played into the theme of a cartoon of a thing very well, because effectively it's a statueless plinth, and you are to inhabit it. And there's a plaque on it with lots of different sayings, which are funny. And then you take a photo of yourself doing a pose on it, like this. That's missing person, so there's nobody on that one. I have left my room. Stand on one leg, this is the spot. So there were all sorts of kind of functions. Then you Instagram them, or whatever, hashtag them. Yeah, so that was something light-hearted and fun. Concrete, Peter Fell, where were you? Could have done it with your ones. Could have done coloured ones. Maybe we did use Peter Fell, I don't know. It was white concrete too, so there you go. And this is another relatively recent project, Studio One on Ponsonby Road, an old decrepit building that kind of felt neglected. Suddenly got a burst of funding from the council, and it's an art space, it's a working art space, so we thought, why not just have paint dripping out of the windows. If you go past it, has anyone seen this? Yep. So yeah, it's quite cool. And we did some furniture too, running paint. So it feels like there's something happening in there. The white walls of the gallery are bleeding out into the community, or something like that. The last project I'm speaking about is just kind of like a teaser, really, because I haven't finished it. But this is a classic New Zealand rest stop. And you get the old half-round picnic table in it. Half-round posts, they haven't bothered to mill the timber, they've just cut the tree in half and got yourself a table surface. I thought I really like the vernacular of that, and I like the kind of New Zealandness of it. And I thought, what if I produced a fine piece of furniture that sort of paid homage to that kind of archetype. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. Can't wait to have done it. I've done it in. I've already had the timber profiled in rosewood. It's already cost me. I had to make a special tool to have it profiled in that. It's already cost me nearly $2,500, and I haven't even got anything that stands off the ground yet. But it will be good. It will be good, and keep an eye out for it. If you want to follow my work, this is my company, clarkbardsleydesign.com. That's my Twitter handle. That's my Instagram handle if anyone does social media stuff. That's it. Thank you.